I love you guys.
Dance off, bro. I have the high ground.
Expecto Patronum!
39 days, 20 people, 1 survivor. Tribe of Nerds.
Hey everybody, welcome back to the Tribe of Nerds. We decided on this that after I'd posted what I was going to do this week on the podcast, Josh reached out and we're like, let's finally cover X-Men 97. So we're just going to kind of go in general about what we liked about the show, which is a lot because X-Men 97 was really, really good. And just kind of go from there. So just to start it off, I mean, Josh, what did you think just in general of X-Men 97?
This was so good. But the overall is just, it was a phenomenal show. The animation was really good. It was nice. What If isn't a bad show, but the animation is, I hate to say it because I love that show as well. One of my favorite Marvel shows, but it's kind of lackluster in some parts and it's very one note. So it's like, I thought it was going to be more of like the kind of Star Wars Visions type where like they had like those different animators and like each studio would get like a different turn. And the What If, amazing show, but this animation was amazing. It was almost like, because obviously 90s cartoon, that's where we were getting some of the best animated cartoons like ever. We had Batman the Animated Series, which is the greatest show of all time. We had obviously the X-Men from the 90s. We had the Spider-Man animated show. Like there was so much good going on. So the same thing with like the new Batman show and even with this, where they kind of took that animation and they kept elements from the 90s, but it just had that modern touch. It was more refined, so it looks phenomenal. The voice acting, they got as many of the original voice actors as they could. I know that Rogue came back. I think Wolverine's the original Wolverine actor too.
I believe so as well. We could look up to confirm, but I believe you're correct on both of those.
And then we got the voice cast phenomenal. Guy who voiced Magneto, whatever he was paid wasn't enough. And we had I can never remember his name, so I'm gonna give the example. Red Skull hilariously voiced Charles Xavier.
Ross Marquand.
Yep. Oh my gosh. Number one, we just know he's a good actor because he was in two of the best Marvel movies of all time, playing Red Skull, which was crazy. And then he was also in The Walking Dead, and now we find him in this show, where he voices Charles Xavier a couple episodes in, but he was phenomenal. Gambit, oh my,
Gambit was so good.
Gambit was probably the best part of the show up until they dissected him. But what happened was like he was phenomenal. Rogue was phenomenal. And then once we got Kurt, oh my God, when Kurt came in, my boy, Kurt is my guy. I love Nightcrawler so much. Just the and I'm like, yes, so the animation, top notch, voice acting, very top notch. It was like, it's weird saying I felt immersed in an animated show because clearly I know it's not real. People don't have skeletons made out of a fictional metal, so I know it's real, but somehow it still made you feel immersed. Like when they got mad, I got mad. When they got sad, I got sad. And I was like, oh my gosh, like, oh no, we lost Gambit. And I'm like, I mean, they lost Gambit. Like, it's one of those things, but overall, very phenomenal show. The writing, really, really good. There's one episode where Jake is not gonna agree with me on that point, but I think that episode was out there. It kind of felt like it came out of nowhere and left out of nowhere. I like to call it the Nightcrawler episode because it was literally like we had a structured story.
Hmm.
Then we got to that episode and everyone was like, what the heck? And then
Yeah.
we moved on and everyone was like, wait a minute, the story's back. Like, what happened for
Yeah.
that one episode?
Yeah, that's the Mojo World episode, and it's just like that is where the plot lost me, but then it came back, especially with the next episode being episode 5, and
Yeah,
just
which was
like
the episode of
yeah,
it was so good. And yeah, but yeah, that's my overall, I guess, for now is this show, if you want to show someone the X-Men, or you have a friend or a loved one that you want to get into the X-Men, and they're one of those weaklings who refuse to read comic books,
yeah,
get them to watch this show and they will feel and they will get engaged and they don't have to know the 90s show, which is the best part. Like, obviously, the 90s show, I was born in 2000. So this show was like done by the time I was alive. It played reruns, so I saw some of it like on TV, and I don't think I've seen every episode because I thought the show was way shorter than it was. And seasons, nope, I didn't catch all those. If you had like Justice League Unlimited, I caught those. But like X-Men, I was like, I didn't quite catch all of them, but I had been exposed to it as a kid on TV. So I was like, okay, like I know what this show is. I just haven't seen all of it. I stepped right into this show without like, granted, I think we all know by now I have an X-Men knowledge. I'm a
yeah,
comic guy and I play the video games and I grew up on the movies, so I have a mix of other X-Men knowledge. So I stepped into this show with what I knew like not a lot or not everything from the previous show, and I was just fine. So you can come into this show with no prior X-Men experience, have a damn good time,
hmm
be totally confused by who the hell Mojo World and like going on, and then go right back to having a damn good time and not
yeah,
have know anything because the story was so well written, it's right there. Like if you
yeah,
don't thing they're going to tell you. Or if you don't understand how this is happening, they might not tell you right away, but they touch on it a little later. So it's
yeah,
nice because they leave some mystery in there for you. Because, like, there were a couple episodes, it was granted, I say a couple, it was probably like 1 or 2 episodes where we were like, who bombed Genosha? Like,
right,
big thing. Like, who did this? And it took us like an episode or two to finally find out who did it, and
hmm
then it was game on from there. So yeah, very strong show. Marvel took a swing and it was a home run on this show. If this show doesn't get 9 million more seasons, I'll probably be the most surprised person on the face of the planet.
yeah. It's confirmed, absolutely confirmed for season 2. I think it just got a season 3 as well. So like, I'm sure it's gonna last probably as many seasons as the original did. I feel like, based on on the direction they're going. So but I never watched the original 90s either. And aside from that one episode, like I mean the first episode like basically tells you the important stuff you need to know, and then just is like, okay, then we're just gonna continue the story from there. And it worked, and like I recognized the characters from the movies that were there, of course, and I mean just like so I felt like pleasantly surprised with like characters that did show up as well, and like even seeing like Cable come in and like having them do the storyline of obviously Cable is Cyclops and Jean Grey's son, so like they went into that and how Mr. Sinister played into that, and then just like I mean there was just so much good stuff in here. So um
It's hilarious because Cable sounds like he's voiced by like a 90-year-old man. And like he's super gritty. He's been distressed by war. So it's the perfect voice. Not a
yes,
oh, it was perfect.
yeah.
And then we had Cyclops, who sounds like he's late 20s max. And like he walks up and he goes, yeah, it's me, Dad. And it's like Nathan, And I'm like, what? It's so funny because I'm like, I know it's time travel, but like trying to wrap my head around the fact that this 6'9" buff dude with white hair is the son of this like scrawny 6'2" guy with brownish reddish hair. And like this is his son. And I'm like,
Yeah.
what's going on right now? Like
Yeah.
it's always so funny seeing that dynamic of like Cable shows up, not obviously Rob Liefeld character. He has a
Mhm.
million pockets all over him. He's the beefiest dude in the whole show. Like makes Wolverine look like a pimple. And it's just legitimately, as soon as he shows up, you're like, oh my gosh, it's not Josh Brolin. But yeah,
Yeah.
you're like, oh, Cable, what are you? And then it immediately goes south. But it was nice because they teased it for like 5 seconds, like, oh, Cable's here, and we all freaked out. And then we all freaked out because like the end of life
Yeah.
started. We're like, oh.
Yeah.
But yeah, Cable's so good.
Yeah, he was really fun to see. We'll touch more later on some of the other roles. I did want to kind of break down some of the characters and their arcs as we go. So I think let's just jump in with Magneto. Like, I know you want to talk about Magneto, and like
Yes,
it
you do.
it kicks off from the first episode with Magneto being in Charles Xavier's will because they think Charles is dead. So he immediately picks up as the new like one in charge of the X-Men. And like from there, like the end of that first episode, you're just hooked into what is happening and what Magneto's goal is. And it's so well done.
It is. I have my little Magneto right next to me as well with the book behind him. So I love me some Magnus. I love me some Eric, whatever you want to call him.
Yeah.
We have Michael Fassbender and Ian McKellen confirmed in the show that those are aliases for Magneto.
Oh yes, we did. I did see that in New Rockstar's breakdown. So with the Magnus thing, because I think you, me, and Gabe like tried watching the '90s series when you guys visited a few years ago, and I remember trying to watch. I'm like, why are they calling him Magnus? Because isn't he Eric Luncher from the movies? Like I didn't realize Magnus was another one of his aliases for Magneto, but like, I mean, I get like sort of why, but I mean, is there anything else to that of why he's called Magnus?
So I believe that Magnus is like in some of the comics, I think that like Magnus is. I was actually just this is wow, this is gonna make me sound even nerdier somehow. Being on a literal podcast about pop culture.
Yeah.
But I was made okay, so my grandparents and some of my friends know nothing about Marvel, DC, Star Wars. So I've started making presentations of like most important heroes, most important villains, most important teams, like powerhouse characters, everything. So obviously I made one about Marvel, and I have three, I say MVH for most valuable heroes and MVV for most valuable villains.
Mhm.
Number two on my most valuable villains is Magneto, and
Mhm.
I believe in the comics, his one of his in one of the comic runs, his middle name was Magnus.
Okay.
Like I believe that like his middle name was Magnus in one of them, and they went with that. I was reading through it on like the fandom too, and I was like, I did not know that. I was like, I knew that they like called him Magnus in this show, but
Mhm.
I couldn't really remember why. And then I went through and I was like, I think that it's like one of his middle names, or like
Okay.
he uses it as an alias, but it's like sometimes it happens. You have like a middle name and they're like, I'm just gonna have people call me that, which there's yeah. But that's one of the reasons I saw, and I thought it was super interesting.
Yeah.
Uh Magneto's story, I did not know that it got even more depressing than like well, I'm not going to say more depressing than the Holocaust because that's probably the most
Yeah.
sad, and we're going to acknowledge that it's sad and it was horrible. But on top of going through that, he escaped from this is the comic, sorry, he escaped from the concentration camp. He was in Auschwitz, so he escaped from Auschwitz with his wife. He went
Mhm.
to a town and he got a job and he was just kind of a working man, and he lived with his wife and his daughter. He got mad at his boss and threw like an iron or like a metal rod at him, and like it didn't like kill him or anything, but it like hit him, and he left and he went home. And when he got home, the boss was mad that like Magneto had did that. So the boss called the KGB because he had been escaped to Russia. The KGB in turn murdered Magneto's daughter right in front of him, and he ripped them apart.
Hmm.
His wife was petrified, so she ran away. And while she was running away, she was unaware that she was pregnant with twins. I think we know who they are.
Wanda and Pietro, yeah.
So, yep, she was pregnant with them. So Magneto just escaped again and went somewhere else without his wife. And he ended up working for the CIA to help track down Nazis. And he was obviously really good at it because he's phenomenal. The CIA betrayed him and they
Oh,
killed his new girlfriend. So, and then Magneto, a lot of death around Magneto. So, and then
jeez.
Magneto killed all of them, and he decided no one is going to save mutants except for mutants. So that's where he started his cause of like mutants for the future. And
Hmm.
that's where it started of like he took the name Magneto and he took it upon himself to be the leader of the mutant revolution and the mutant liberation movement. Which I was like, wow, that is incredibly more intense than just the one thing, like just the one thing alone. I totally get it, man. You can be a villain and I would completely understand. But
Yeah,
add all of that other stuff in, and I'm like, there was no chance for this guy not to be a villain. That
right.
everyone but to my knowledge, that is why they use the name Magnus, which
Okay.
was hilarious. I just went on like a 20-year tangent just to explain the middle name Magnus.
Well, but I needed that because like I was confused for since like a few years ago when we tried watching the 90s cartoon together. So
Why did you say that name?
but like no, and I know like that storyline that you just described, they adapted into some of the movies. So like, First Class, he does Nazi hunting, and then like Apocalypse, he has a storyline with that daughter and wife, and the wife also dies with his daughter in that movie, and then he rips the guys apart. So like it's cool like you explaining that and me like remembering what the some of the good things the movies did to adapt some of those storylines.
Yeah, I will say in this show, never expected to see a buff Magneto wearing a Speedo at any, if that was not on my 2024 bingo list, I will admit. I was like, huh, you know what this show needs? More Magneto bulge. And I I did not know that that was going to be a thing. And he showed up and he was wearing the Speedo and I went, well, here we are. And that was kind of, I was like, oh, I will say that Magneto's look in this show is when he first shows up, it's good. Like you have the suit with the giant M. He took
Mhm.
the helmet off, the long white flowing hair.
Yep.
Awesome suit. Looks what legitimately just the same as the comics. It's beautiful. Looks awesome. But the final suit where we go back to that classic with one of my favorite helmets ever invented. It's like on the same level as like the Darth Vader helmet and like for it's just iconic. Everyone should know the Magneto helmet. I was like, this is what Magneto should be. For like how good Magneto was doing and how good he was when we got back to like, okay, he's bad again. Like he is
Yeah.
mad. He's back to the Mutant Liberation Front. And I like that they dragged along two X-Men with him because it really showed us like, and it was the two X-Men who had went through the most pain. And it's always good in a comic book show or a movie to show, hey, when people go through pain, they can go bad for a while. Like
Hmm.
it's happens and like, it's like in the Spider-Man movie, Andrew Garfield says, I stopped pulling my punches. I was
Yep.
mad.
Yep.
grieving. All this crazy stuff happens. So I really liked when what's his name? Sunspot?
Yeah, Sunspot and Rogue both turned.
Sunspot and Rogue went with him. And number one, Sunspot looks awesome.
Mhm.
Phenomenal. Rogue handing over Remy's trench coat was tear jerking.
Yeah.
It made complete sense, but Magneto's look, and especially the scene where he's recreating I think it's Fatal Attractions. He's recreating that pose, and you see him looming in the background while Wolverine's like freaking out and his whole body is shaking and his veins
Mhm.
popping out. You're just like, this is exactly what I wanted. Like, I wanted this Magneto. I wanted this bad guy. Because listen, I have a sticker right up here. I have a sticker on the back of my car, and I have a tattoo planned because Magneto was right. I am a Magneto enthusiast. I love Magneto.
Mhm.
I think he's right. Listen, it's right now. Obviously, we're not going to talk about politics. I don't want to talk about politics. I hate politics. It was my
Right.
major, so I hate it. But that's how that works. So it was but like the gay community especially right now, has really taken to the phrase of like Magneto was right, or like
Mhm.
the term mutant. They've really taken to it recently, and it's like it's kind of growing, and I'm like, oh, it's cool because as an X-Men fan, I'm like X-Men fan. X-Men is also cool, Charles's son, but X-Men as an X-Men fan, freaking awesome to see more stuff flowing around the internet.
Yeah.
And then I read it and I'm like, oh, this is real. But it's super cool. And like people relate to him. So I think that might be a point where that's why I'm like, hey, I'm Team Magneto 150%. We're all the way. Like, he's gone through a lot of stuff. It makes sense why he does some of the things he does. Like, maybe I'm definitely not going to excuse like all of the murder. Some of
Right.
it makes sense because some of them were murderers, but also I'm not Batman. I love Batman, but I'm not like if you kill the number of murderers in the world, the number of murderers but stays the same. I'm like, yeah, but what if you kill two murderers? And then there we go.
Yeah.
But that was always my argument. What if you kill two murderers? Then we're good. But that's it, kind of it lures you in to like the even with her whole speech. She's like, hey, Magneto was right, and he showed people that he was right, and even now humans are starting to understand, like, they don't have to respect Magneto or what he's doing, but they definitely understand why now, because they're
Mhm.
like, literally just watched a mutant genocide, and like some people were like, good riddance. Everyone else was like, this is an atrocity. Like, this is crazy. And I think it did a phenomenal job proving that. And Magneto was that like founding father of it. And I think he was the perfect catalyst for this show as kind of like it was that hero turning into like a backup villain. Because even
Mhm.
when we end the show, he's still like Magneto, but he's like working with the X-Men because they don't know when they are.
Yeah.
And really cool to end on that note, because we started on the note where Magneto's trying to be a good guy, and we end on the note where like I don't think he's trying to be a good guy anymore, but he has to team up with the people that he was literally just fighting,
Yeah.
and they're still gonna be mad at him because he just almost killed Wolverine.
Yeah. Ripped the adamantium out of him.
Yeah, they're still gonna be very, very mad at him.
Yeah.
I think he was the perfect catalyst as kind of like a backup villain to Bastion in this show. And he
Mhm.
was phenomenally well done. As a massive Magneto fan, I could not have loved this show anymore. It was phenomenal. For 5 seconds, I was depressed because I thought he died. And then we were back in the game. And I was like, okay, we're good now, guys. Like, I'm back.
Yeah, I mean, I thought that they weren't necessarily going to kill Magneto off, so I was definitely shocked that like it appeared that he died in episode 5, but I'm like, but then when he was back a couple episodes later, I'm like, that makes sense because, for Magneto shouldn't be killed off. Like there's more to tell with that character in this show. So,
He does not agree with Gambit though. He said, "No, I think that guy deserved to die." He was no,
No, I was very sad with Gambit.
line for Gambit. Keep him in the ground. Never bring him back.
No, I was very sad, and so like seeing X-Men 97, watching this before Deadpool and Wolverine especially made me like love Gambit even more. And so like here, like this voice actor for Gambit was really, really good. He had the accent down without going over the top like they wanted Channing Tatum to do. Which I mean makes sense for the context of Deadpool and Wolverine, but this voice actor for X-Men 97 just made more sense for a natural Gambit. Um so I really enjoyed him, and like yeah, the whole Genosha thing and Gambit being the sacrifice was like super sad, and especially because like it's so cool to like have him just like be stabbed and then still use his power, his kinetic energy to blow up the Sentinel. And then you have Rogue crying over his body that's just like blown to shreds.
With the Wanda Maximoff vibes too, which made it
Yes.
because we had already had to see so much of Wanda's grief, and then she's like, "I can't feel you," and I was like, "Why are we doing this?" Like, help but cry when people talk about not being able to feel. Like,
Yeah.
hits me every time. But yeah, Gambit was phenomenal in this show. As soon as we saw, I think it was like what, episode 1, we see Gambit in a crop top making breakfast, and I'm like, yeah, this is Gambit. Like he's just chilling out, maxing, relaxing, all cool, freaking making breakfast, hanging out, and you're still like, him and Rogue are like, they're not like a thing, but they're a thing, and it's like it's one of those weird scenarios. And I think my favorite part of the show is when Gambit is sitting there and he's like, oh, Rogue and Magneto are having an affair, like they're sleeping together, and he's mad about it. And when Nightcrawler is sitting there like, oh, it looks like they have the room reserved for the next 4 or 5 hours. They must be training really hard. And Gambit's like, yeah, okay, I get it. Just like walk away. I was like, that was so funny. But it's sad because we pretty much this entire show we have to like watch Gambit suffer. Like episode 1 and 2, he's Gucci. And then, well, like episode 1 and half of episode 2, he's Gucci. The second half of episode 2, he kind of thinks there's something going on, so he's suffering a little bit. And then we have to watch him when they're like, actually, when he talks to Rogue, and she's like, I don't know, I can't feel you, but like with Magneto, his powers counteract mine, so we can like. I can hold his hand or I can touch his face and I won't kill him and I won't like do anything, but I can't do that with you. And you could tell his heart was broken, and he
Mhm.
definitely died thinking that she chose him, but she like he died thinking that she chose Magneto, but she really chose him and turned Magneto down. So it was kind of one of those tragic endings where like he was chosen, but he didn't know.
Yeah.
And he ultimately fell. But that moment right before he got stabbed, I was like, oh, he's about to rock the house with this Sentinel. And then
Yeah.
he got stabbed, and I went, well, I was wrong. And then he did anyway, and I went,
Yeah.
oh, and like we all freaked out, and it was nice watching him get his comeuppance as his last move. And then obviously it was teased that Gambit is gonna be the Horseman of Death in the future.
Mhm.
So I guess we'll see him again, but as one of the little baddies working with Apocalypse, and I guess we're gonna have to watch Rogue come to terms with the fact that her Mon Cher is the pretty much the god of death is coming up,
Yeah. That's
which
gonna
is gonna
be
be awesome.
That's gonna be interesting because like I'm glad because they're telling that story that they didn't go with, because like I was talking to Kevin and we were talking about after that episode where like, okay, is Cable just gonna reverse everything and bring Gambit back to life? And we're glad that they didn't go with that storyline of just bringing Gambit back by the end of it, because if they had wanted to, they could have used Cable for that. But
Yeah. I
um,
Yeah, I agree. I'm very happy that they didn't go that way. I think the route of like bringing Gambit back through Apocalypse and he's gonna have to suffer before he gets to come back is I like it because and then, obviously heroes are supposed to come back from horrible stuff and they're supposed to come back even better. So I think that this is gonna help and it's gonna make Gambit even cooler. And I swear if he comes out and he's wearing like all black with purple highlights, I'll freak out and he'll probably be the coolest looking character in the show, period.
yep, yep. I guess since we've already kind of touched on her as well, I mean, we can go into Rogue here and just like it was cool because I only saw like the Anna Paquin version in the X-Men movies, and they didn't really do Rogue justice really at all. Like they didn't really show off her powers. And so like to see like a fully fledged Rogue, like how the comics actually depict her was really, really cool. I mean, the fact that she gets Captain Marvel's powers and it's like, okay, this makes perfect sense for like what her powers are. And so I really enjoyed Rogue. I mean, and a lot of the heartbreaking stuff is centered around her and Magneto. And like, I mean, she loses Gambit. She is just like she feels like the whole world's against her, which I mean, she has reason to believe that. So like I enjoyed Rogue in this show. It's like depressing that she had to go through so much, but
Yeah, she is the emotional powerhouse of this
mhm,
show. She is really the one who keeps the finger on the pulse for the X-Men and like we see her at the beginning of the show, she is so happy. And she's just happy to have a family, happy to be with the X-Men and happy to have her friends around and
mhm,
there's kind of like that love dynamic with Gambit, but nothing's really going on. And then Magneto shows up and she kind of gets confused and she's trying to have like the best of both worlds, but both worlds are kind of trying to make her decide. And then ultimately, for a minute there, she chose one world, and then it seemed like both of her worlds were taken from her. So then she had nowhere. And then she didn't know what her identity was. She was like, the X-Men are different, and a bunch of my friends are dead. A bunch of the people I know were dead. Like, so many people passed away, and it was intense watching her have to go through all of this and watching her like she really went through like this entire show just took her through the like multiple stages of grief, but they started by showing us like her at her happiest point. Like,
mhm,
just I'm a hero and I live with the X-Men and it's great and I have friends and they're all there for me and apparently one of them is a clone, but we're gonna figure that out and they're having a baby. What's going on? But like it's a complicated life, but it's one that she enjoys, and then it immediately becomes one that she now kind of disdains because that's the reason that she lost everything. And then she finds out that like Magneto is still alive, but also then she realizes like, oh, like Remy is still really dead though. Like,
mhm,
but she for a second there, you can see that there's a glimmer of hope that he's still alive. Because oh, if Magneto survived, like maybe he survived. Who knows? And then we get the best scene in the show where cameo character shows up. We get good old Steven Rogers,
yep,
and he walks out and tries to talk some sense with Rogue, and he's like, I can only imagine what you're going through, but this isn't the way to go about it. He kind of helps her a little bit, tries to steer her in the right direction, and she throws his shield into a mountain. So I hope we could get a whole show of just him having to climb that mountain and get that shield back, and it would be hilarious. Just a two
yeah,
episode short if he's like, I have to climb this dang mountain because frickin' Rogue threw my threw my darn shield up it, and now I don't know where it is, and hopefully
yeah,
there's a tracking device on it. But it was so good, and kind of she got to be able to force someone else into a decision now of like, are you with me or not? And
mhm,
he ultimately wasn't with her, so and then she left and did stuff on her own, and it was really cool to watch her torture the scientist because he's like, you can't do anything. She's like, oh yes, I can.
yep,
Like, it was almost like it felt like the mental manipulation that Charles's sister used in Deadpool and Wolverine. She's like,
Cassandra.
yeah, when
Yeah.
she's putting her fingers in their head because
Yeah.
you were like touching him, and his like head flies back, and he's screaming in pain and agony, and it even starts like affecting her too, and then we see her like crying, and she gets to have the conversations with Kurt, her brother, and she gets to talk with the X-Men, and they show that they're there for her, and it's super sweet. And then ultimately, that wasn't enough to save her, and she goes over to Magneto's side, and she's still conflicted, still doesn't know what to do, but she's still angry and she's still sad, and the only thing she wants to do now is like make sure that other people don't have to feel that way. So of course she goes with Magneto. Like Rogue is a sweetheart. She wants everyone to be happy. She wants the world to be a good place because she's a good person. But in this show, we get to see her do some bad things in order to try to be a good person. And it's interesting. It was nice. It was a nice switch up.
Yeah.
And and instead of just having her be like, "Oh, I can't touch anybody," and like, because that was pretty much what the movies are. Is it
Yeah.
true? Can they cure us? Rogue didn't want to be cured. She was cool with being Rogue, as she should be. Rogue's awesome.
Yes.
And it was really nice. It was nice to get to see that and not have to deal with like the what if I was different? And
Yeah. That was one of my least favorite parts, I think, among the many bad parts of X-Men Last Stand was the fact like that Rogue is just gonna like push to cure herself, and I didn't like that plot line at the that how they used the cure plot line at all in that movie. So
yeah, I get you on that. That was I every time the cure is brought up, I'm at home like and it's like I'm screaming and I'm like I'm acting like these are real people. But
Yeah. Yeah.
Dinklage is not actually an evil scientist that made giant killer robots. I have to remind myself sometimes, but it was a nice switch up, and it was really good to see a Rogue again who's like confident in her skin, and we got to see her like she was dealing with the fact that she can't enjoy everything that other people can, but that doesn't mean she wants to change. It just makes it so like it's another heartbreak. Like she doesn't want to change. She just takes it as like this is a symptom of having this power. Like,
Mhm.
there's certain things Magneto can't do, like be happy. So that's just a thing for his power. I guess if you can control metal, everyone on Earth just wants to make you a miserable person, apparently, because that's Magneto's entire life. So for Rogue, it was just, hey, I can't touch people, but like I can love people and I can be there and I can be a good person. I just can't like physically like I can't hug anybody or I can't like give them support. And if I do, I have to have an entire jacket and I have to have gloves and I cannot let any part of my actual body touch any part of their actual body or else stuff's gonna hit the fan really quickly. But
Mhm.
it was a nice switch up.
Yeah, agreed. So I mean another big couple of other big storylines in the show. I mean, so Storm is another one, Cyclops and Jean are another. So I mean, I think we can go to Storm next. For me, I was so like seeing Storm lose her powers was crazy. Like that's something I didn't expect like in like episode 2 or 3 or whatever it was. And then I'm like, well, they can't just have Storm be gone. But like
Yeah,
even
she is
even
a mega level mutant.
yeah, and just like to even ever just be gone from the intro after that episode is like, my God, they've actually gotten rid of Storm right now. But so then she goes to get help from Forge, and it was it was another weird plot line to actually get to getting her powers back. Once we got to that point when Storm got her powers, it was awesome. It's just like I don't even know what I was like watching with the clips because again, I'm not familiar with that part of the comics. So, um, uh, if you want to shed a little light on that part.
Yeah, so some of it is, it really does boil down to like this. I'm going to put it in very simple terms.
Yeah.
So it's probably going to like rip me apart and be like, that's way too simple. But it really is the part where it's like, she had to, it was like, you know what? I just came up with a different metaphor. Spider-Man 2,
Yeah.
Tobey Maguire,
Yep.
he hit a web block,
Yep. Yep.
like an existential crisis, and it stopped him from his webs, and he wasn't able to use it, and he had to stop being Spider-Man for a while and then really go through some stuff and figure himself out before he could come back and be the character again.
Yep.
I was all right with this. I thought like the giant doubt chasing her was like a good visual for it.
Yeah. Yeah.
It made sense. And if I'm correct, the visual was like also voiced by her to also show like, hey, it's her. Like she's blocking herself from the power. It was almost like a placebo. It's
Hmm.
like, oh, they gave her this drug and the drug took away her powers for a second, but like not permanently, because it was also just kind of, she mentions, I had a conversation with Jean and I told her I wish I didn't have powers, and like she got what she wished for, and turns out it's not what she wanted, and she got to live in that life for a little bit, hated it. Here comes along Forge, and he was able to help, but a lot of it was just that mental block. So she was able to kind of get out of her own head and say, you know what? No, like I did a lot of good with my powers, and my powers aren't an inherently bad thing. My powers aren't bad. Like
Yeah.
this, I do good things, and this is who I was meant to be. Like I don't have to wish I was human. I was made to be more than human. Like I'm Homo superior. I'm Storm. Like I can control the
Yes.
weather. I'm an Omega level mutant up there with the likes of Magneto and Charles frickin' Xavier. Like I can do this. And so it gets back. It was a little bit more of like the, SpongeBob, let's hold hands and, sing Kumbaya, and as long as you're happy, you can control lightning. But it was pretty much that. But
Okay.
that's the simple term that I'm gonna put, is like, it was the magic within you. Uh, and once she kind of figured that out and was able to get that mental block and kind of go through that crisis that I think she kind of needed to remind her who she was. Then she came back showing way more skin, got the
Yeah.
other outfit, flying around, friggin' zooming past cows and stuff, and
Yeah.
shooting up. And I was like, "Yo!" Like, it was awesome. But yeah, it's that little part. It was interesting, but I understood where it kind of went only because I always have Spider-Man 2 on the mind. So it's
Yeah.
Spider-Man 1 and 2, even the third one, I won't lie. Those are always in a subsection of my brain waiting to be referenced and waiting to be used. So as soon as I was watching this, I was literally sitting there by myself, like just watching the show, and I went, "Oh, it's like Spider-Man 2."
I
And then I just went back to watching the show, and I was like, "Web block." Yeah. And that was it.
Yeah, I think I take things too literally sometimes, so I think it just like I watch what I'm watching and I think it's the same episode as Mojo World and I'm just like what is happening right now?
Right? You're just like, dude, this is not realistic. And then I'm like, okay, I'm watching a show where there's like 6'4" scientist that's covered in blue fur.
Yeah.
I I need to calm myself down for a second.
I'm watching a show where someone shoots optic blasts from their eyes. So
Watching a show where the guy who shoots optic blasts from his eyes shot a blast so big that it slowed down the velocity building up while he was falling from the sky enough
yeah.
to do a superhero landing in the middle of the desert.
Yeah, yeah. But yeah, no, the storm story was interesting, so now that clears it up a little bit. And so then we get the Cyclops and Jean storyline, which is interesting. I didn't know that there was that Jean had a clone of called Madeline Pryor. I didn't know that from the comics, so that was interesting to see. Obviously, as I mentioned before, I knew about the Cable thing with their son. and everything, but like, or at least I didn't know Mr. Sinister had a part to play in that, but it makes sense. So it was interesting to watch that play out. Like, I think, what is it, episode 3, where they're facing Madeline Pryor, and like, so that's an interesting storyline. But just like, I loved like the build up to that, and then just like having then showing the payoff of Cable, and then showing it get to the end, and Jean has her powers back, and then is able to use them to beat Mr. Sinister and Bastion. So it was cool to see. I liked their storyline together. It was cool.
That moment at the end too, when like she touched Cyclops and took the ability up, took his beam away so that like Cable was able to actually see his dad's eyes.
Yeah,
So
yep.
they prove that like, look, I told you, like you have your dad's eyes. And I was like, God, it was so sweet. I was like crying in the club. I'm like, what are you gonna do? But it was so good. And I did really like their story and kind of how they were going through, because everyone they're the couple. Like it's Jean Grey and Cyclops. Even in the movies, Wolverine's like, "Oh, let me try to get up in this." And
Yep, yep.
it's like, nope, it's the Cyclops and Jean. Like that's them. It's the couple. That's who it always has to be. That's who it's always gonna be.
Yeah,
Like even
and
in the show, they touch on it a little bit, where like she kisses Wolverine out of like confusion, and she's just like, it kind of grounded her for a second, because she's like, I don't feel like that's my husband, or like I don't know what's real. I don't know what's not real. So she kind of kissed him out of confusion. And even Wolverine, and he's wanted her for years, all the way back to him frickin' stroking his hand over the picture with her in it laying on the bed from the 90s show. And it was just kind of, he just went, nope. You and Boy Scout are meant to be. You were confused. We'll chalk it up to that. I'm gonna go. And it was very sweet, and it's a very mature thing, because like, people go through these problems, and like marital problems happen, and I don't necessarily agree with like cheaters ever. I usually believe that like cheaters should die, but in this one, it's like, technically, I was real confused for a minute, because I'm like, technically, he was cheating on his wife with his wife, so I'm not sure about this part, but it was really funny, but also a little bit confusing, because I'm like, I don't know how to feel right now, because
yeah, yeah.
technically. But I can see how both of them would kind of be confused where to go from here. And I think it dealt with it in a nice way. And it was, yeah, it was almost like a co-parenting model. Because it's like, when one person leaves, and like when people get divorced and they leave their partner for someone else, and then they have to figure out like how to do this whole co-parenting thing. And
Mhm.
they have to figure out like, the kid's gonna be like, that's not my mom. So like when Jean Grey like touches him and reads his memory, he's like, you're not my mom. Like stop trying to be. And it was nice that they pulled some of those like childhood elements, but had adults dealing with it, because, adults go through this stuff, and it's hard, and it's not easy on anybody involved, but it kind of gives some closure, and it shows that, you're gonna struggle a little bit, and you're going to go through a lot of stuff, but there is another side. Like there's never you can always get to the other side of it. It's just going to take a lot of work. It's going to be hard, and it's not going to be fun, but you
Yeah.
can get there. And I like that the show touched on it, because I think it's an important thing. And it's divorce is common now. We're not in the old times where it's like, we can't get divorced because God will cut off my pee-pee if we get divorced.
I'm
Like,
pretty sure if people got divorced, the woman would just get blamed as a witch.
correct. And like murdered.
Yeah.
But come a long way in society, and treated like a mutant, pretty much. But we've
Yeah.
come a long way in society, thank God. So I think it's important that we touch on stuff like this, and I think it was really nice, and I thought it was beautiful. I think the storyline with them was really beautiful, and seeing that they're still alive, but they're trapped together. And
Yeah.
it's kind of funny, because for the whole show, it was them nervous, wondering where Cable was. And now for this next season, they flipped it, and it's Cable nervous about where his mom and dad are, or like his technically stepmom and dad are. It's crazy family dynamic.
Yeah.
But it's now he's worried about where they are. And while they were trying to bring him back, now he's going to try to be finding them. So, and then he can get them back to their time. And I think it's a super interesting way to be able to say, hey, like this is where the show is leading in. And I can't wait. I'm very excited to see where that goes. And Cyclops was done so good in this
He's
show.
done justice as opposed to what has happened in the Fox X-Men movies. And
I have James Marsden Cyclops sitting right here. And
I like James Marsden.
I love James Marsden.
Yeah.
Great actor. I've seen Sonic, and he's fantastic. All right. With Russell Brand. And he's a good actor. He's in a lot of good movies. But like his Cyclops, they're pretty much just like, hey.
Yeah, well,
of Jean. And then they kill him. And then he comes back and he's like, hey, Wolverine, that's my girlfriend. And then it's like, okay, that's all James Marsden's screen time. I'm like, what?
Yeah,
Where'd he go?
He just doesn't done justice. I wanted to like him in the role. Like I think he looks the part and everything. Again, they just didn't do anything with his character.
This show did something that, like,
Yes.
you guys know I'm a huge Wolverine fan. I love Wolverine. Wolverine is not, never will be, and never should be the leader of the X-Men. He is a member, and he is a great X-Men, not the leader. Scott is the leader of the X-Men. You can argue Charles Xavier, nah. He's like the college advisor for the X-Men. Cyclops is the leader. He was on the core team when it was first debuted. He was the leader then. He's the leader now, and he's gonna be the leader later on. Cyclops is who should be the leader. He should definitely be getting more screen time than Wolverine. In almost everything, unless it's like a Wolverine story or like a Wolverine movie, different. But if there's an X-Men movie, Wolverine should be there, but not the main character. And I feel like this Hugh Jackman, phenomenal like character actor. He's a phenomenal actor in general. He was really good as Wolverine. So they centered their universe around so much so that 24 years later, they made him the anchor being for that universe.
Yeah.
You know, it's in reality, that's not what Wolverine is. Like, Wolverine's important, don't get me wrong, and I love Wolverine, but Cyclops is the leader, and this show did what the Fox universe should have done. Scott is in charge, and he's struggling with being a leader, but he's trying his best, and he's making mistakes. Wolverine is there to support when he agrees, and to not support when he disagrees. So, like, you'll see parts where he, like, okay, get your game face on, mask is on, we're fighting now, back up Scott. And then you see the parts where he's like, oh yeah, Boy Scout, what are you gonna do, make me? And he's like arguing with him, and that's what Wolverine is. He's the guy who's there to do a job, but if he disagrees with how the job's being done, he's gonna be vocal about it. He's gonna tell you. Scott is the guy who's there trying to be a leader, and he's gonna respect Wolverine because he's there to play a part, but also he's gonna demand respect back, and he's gonna try his best to be a leader. And this show did that. And it was like the inverse of what the Fox universe had made their universe into, where it's like, oh, Hugh Jackman Wolverine is the most important, when it should have been Cyclops. But, you know, that's the end of my rant about that. Hugh Jackman's great. Please, nobody kill me over thinking that I don't like Hugh Jackman. Definitely not true. I've seen The Greatest Showman. Okay, you can leave me alone now. It's phenomenal, and Cyclops in this show, as you said, you worded it perfectly. He was done justice.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and Jean was done a lot of justice too. I mean, they screwed up the Phoenix storyline twice in the Fox universe. So much so that all I've done with Dark Phoenix is literally watched YouTube videos about it. I haven't even actually watched the movie because I don't need to. So
Blame you. Listen, am I dogging the actors? No. They were probably given a horrible script written by executives who wanted to make money before they knew they had to sell the rights eventually.
yeah,
Because they made a franchise that was good in some parts, but also had really ugly parts.
yeah,
I think it was just a cash grab. They decided to release some last minute movies. We can tell by frickin' gosh, what's her name? Jennifer Lawrence's makeup as Mystique in like the last movie she's in. I'm
yeah.
like,
From what I
that
saw,
doesn't
yeah,
look like her. Like that
yeah,
looks like a totally different actress stepped into the role and they forgot how to do her makeup. Like, not, hey, she's
yeah,
an entire sub franchise of the X-Men world. So it's yeah, it was super weird, but I'm glad that they did it this here. And I feel like these characters were really, almost all of them, I would argue, were giving a chance to shine. Like Wolverine had his moments where he shined. Jean was given a couple moments to shine, especially where the Phoenix Force came back.
yes, yep,
April shined in some spots. Cyclops shined. Storm had her shining moments. Jubilee had a whole freaking episode, which
yep,
I hated, but she had it.
yeah. She
And
did have it.
even Sunspot had his like time to shine, and he was brand new. Like he wasn't even in
Yep,
the X-Men. He fought Jubilee on joining them for like half the season.
yep,
Magneto shined, Xavier shined, Beast was given a couple chances to shine, and like even Morph, they like gave Morph so many good jokes, and he had some emotional moments. He had good ideas. Every single character, Gambit, everybody was given a chance to really have like at least one shining moment in the show. And
mhm,
it's hilarious because Nightcrawler also got that moment. And I think my favorite moment with Nightcrawler is when him and Wolverine are fighting in that room. And no, my friend, nine. And I'm like, yeah. And they're just like fighting with the swords, and Wolverine has the claws out, and it's fantastic. Fantastic. And it's probably the best moment of the show, in my opinion. But my ultimate point is that they were all given moments to shine, and I think that's why everyone left happy. Is because if you had a favorite character, they had at least one or two moments to shine. So no one got left out, or like no one got left behind here. Everyone got their moment.
yeah. Well said. I mean, at this point, I mean, is there anybody else I mean, do we want to touch on the villains or like, I mean, what
I
else? We do
just need
want?
to touch on Nightcrawler a little bit more because he's my baby boy. So
Yeah,
Nightcrawler, fan freaking tastic, born from Mystique, and like was adopted. His adoptive sister is Rogue, so they grew up together. Phenomenal relationship in this show. Every time they talk, it's so beautiful. And like obviously, Nightcrawler was living in Genosha. He was able to help a lot, and then pretty much from there, he joins the X-Men again, and he's back on the main team, going on with the adventures. He was a phenomenal support character. Emma Frost and Sebastian Shaw show up. They were awesome. You could tell that they were a little sleazy, but still ultimately, like, they were there to help their kind. So it's
mhm,
always nice when, like, when we talk about villains like that, it's nice because not usually the world isn't so black and white. It's not so cut and dry. Like, there's motivations behind stuff. Like, we can talk about some of the most evil people in movies, and about 98 to 99% of them have a reason that they're doing what they're doing. And sometimes it's not totally bad. Like, you have me watch Star Wars Episode 3, Anakin kills a bunch of kids. And when I was a kid, I was
yeah,
like, they made him do it. He had to do it. And like it's like I was like a 7-year-old kid I was 5 when it came out, but like I rewatch it and like I was some little kid like they made him do it. He had to save Padme. And it's like you watch all these villains sometimes, and like you watch Mr. Freeze, and you're like he has to save his wife. Good point. You watch
mhm,
like Catwoman, and she's just trying to make herself rich, but in some stories she's trying to like support another person she's caring for too, and you're like, I get that, that's okay. Or like you look around, there's so many villains in here, so I'm getting more ideas, but like you turn around and
yeah,
many villains that they're like, oh, you can't be totally evil. And they kind of went that way in this show with Sebastian too, because when Bastion shows up, and especially during that end fight, which number one, crazy, his like whole eye is hanging out, and I'm like,
Yeah.
that's
Yeah.
weird. And they're saying like Charles tried to help you. Like he went to your door, he knocked, and he tried to have you be an X-Man. Your parents did not support you, and they are the ones who did this. Like they wanted to help you, and your parents did not, they declined. They wanted, like, they pretty much wanted you to suffer. They didn't want you to be what you are. They wanted to change you. And it was super sweet because you could tell, like, for a couple of seconds, Bastion's like really soaking it in, like, I can tell that this actually happened. But also, like, ultimately, he was at a point where he was kind of too far gone because he
Well,
had
yeah.
infected millions of people around the world with this disease. He had already gone through and literally murdered so many mutants in Genosha. But also, we don't totally know if he's dead yet because all of the other X-Men got sent to different parts of time. So, Bastion might be dead. He's probably dead, but we don't technically know that. It hasn't been confirmed yet because that same explosion sent everyone else other places. So, we'll
Yeah.
find.
Yeah, that was crazy. I mean, to even like for everybody to like become Sentinels, like we first see it when Rogue throws Trask off the building, and then he comes up as a Sentinel, and then all these civilians are becoming Sentinels, like the news lady, and that was crazy to me because I did not see that coming, and it's like, how are they gonna deal with this? Like, it was just crazy to watch.
Yeah, the Trask was probably the craziest ones, or Bastion's mom was a pretty
Mm,
one too, because I'm like, that's low, dude. Like that's
yeah.
bro. But it's yeah, that one was pretty crazy. And then like the whole neighborhood being made of them, and
Yeah.
like, even when um I'll bring it up anyway. Even when Iron Man and Captain America are standing with the president in
Yeah.
like the situation room, it looks like they're even like they had moved all the way up through the federal government and they were in the room like where the president was making decisions about like, hey, what's going on, what should we do, and like now we have these two heroes here, and then all of a sudden they stand up and they're like, I'm like, oh, like dang, it's one of those things where it's like it's really good in a show when they can show you like he did this for so long that they had literally worked their way to the highest levels of the federal government, and they were literally like special advisors to the president of the United States. And it was crazy. And Bastion, it was almost like one of those things where he's like Scar from The Lion King.
Mhm.
His plan it wasn't fulfilled,
Mhm.
but it worked. Like
Yeah.
he did for a moment in time, he won. And he
Yeah.
had everyone at his fingertips. If it wasn't for Magneto, they weren't winning that fight.
No, no.
And so, in my eyes, he's like one of those Scar villains because he won. His dream just wasn't fulfilled. But like he accomplished it.
Yeah. Yeah.
He did it. He destroyed Xavier's mansion, which happens like every 5 hours. So he's probably like, oh, that's nothing. But like then he went on and fought everyone else, and he just went back to his own time, and well, not his own time, but he went back to his island, and it was crazy watching all that, and it was really nice. And I know we're probably going to talk about it in a second, so I won't say it. But watching all those cameos that he was talking to was insane. I was cheering like fat kid in a candy store. I was like, "Oh my gosh, I want that one. No, I want that one. No, I want that one." And seeing all these characters pop up on not even like the rest of them in the show, but like on that one video screen where he's talking to all of them after Genosha, and like when that plan's about to be put in effect. Probably the coolest Zoom call ever once we got to see who was on it. And it was just phenomenal.
Yeah. I'm trying to remember who was on it again.
So you're good. I got this. We had the two biggest ones for me is that we had Doctor Doom was on the call.
Oh, yes. Yep.
Victor Von Doom was on the call, and then Baron Zemo
Yes, I remember.
was
Yep.
on the call in the comic accurate suit with the purple mask and the little fur on. Oh, it was so good. It
That we
was
only saw for a little bit on Falcon and Winter Soldier.
yeah. Listen, those are the two biggest ones that really, really hit me. Like there were more, but those are the two biggest ones
Yeah.
because like we just got Doctor Doom and Baron Zemo in the same scene.
Yeah.
And number one, that will probably never happen again in the MCU, but
Probably
that was
not.
awesome. We just go to the next, like, we make it to Secret Wars, and there's Robert Downey Jr. dancing as Victor Von Doom, and they, like, it just shows him at this angle, and then it goes, the camera pans further this way, and we see Zemo's back to back with him. We're like, yo, they did it. But I would stand up in the theater and walk out. I'd be like, I've accomplished everything I need in life. I'll see everyone later. But it was just crazy to see those cameos and like, because even if it was no one else in the room, Doom and Zemo are like, that's all you need. And you have a powerhouse of a team ready to try to take over the world. And he had even more than that. He had world leaders. He had like the secretary for the UN. He had presidents from countries. Like he had leaders of corporations all on the call. And it was
Yep.
crazy. It was awesome to see like how far his influence had traveled.
Yep. Yep. Other cameos we'd get more of turning into the Hulk. I remember that, and Quicksilver. You got
That Quicksilver one, I went, what?
yeah. Yep. You did. I do remember also the '90s Spider-Man was in there for a second.
Around New York when the power went out.
Yep. Yep. I remember those. I'm sure there were a couple other ones that I can't quite remember, but
They also had we got a glimpse at Daredevil. I believe
yes. Yeah.
I believe we also got a glimpse at like Luke Cage and Jessica Jones. I believe they showed up for a second.
Mm.
Um and the ending episode, I think it was Flash Thompson, but we also got to see out of costume Peter Parker and Mary Jane.
Yeah,
Why?
I do remember that. Yep.
We got to see Silver Samurai.
Yep.
And Omega Red made the cameo protecting the Russian president.
Yep.
When the power went out, Omega Red escaped and they went to protect the president from Bastion's sentinels. So yeah, we got Omega Red, we got Spider-Man, we had Daredevil, Luke Cage, Jessica Jones, Silver Samurai. I think we already mentioned it, but we had Captain America and Iron Man
Yep.
protect the United States president. Um, I know there was some. I feel like I'm missing someone.
Probably, but I
Like I'm
can't.
missing someone.
It's been a couple months since I watched X-Men '97. I'm definitely gonna give it a rewatch at some point, because it was really enjoyable. But
Oh, do you know someone we totally forgot to mention?
who?
We saw The Watcher.
Yeah, I'm trying to remember. Yeah, I think I remember the Watcher was in the background at some point.
Yep. So in one of the scenes when they're over Genosha, and it was before Genosha got attacked,
Okay.
we see the Watcher in the sky, and he's like watching from behind. So and then that immediately alerts us like something's about to happen because he only
Yeah,
watches like those events that are like critical.
it's a nice detail to for the.
Oh yeah, Ronan the Accuser.
Yeah, Ronan the Accuser was in the Shi'ar Empire episode with Charles Xavier. Yeah, that was cool to see.
Thunderbolt Ross when Rogue was attacking the facility.
Hmm.
Um, oh, I'm sorry, I'm looking at a list right now because it was going to drive me.
Yeah.
We got Doctor Strange performing surgery while the power was out using his.
Mm. Yep.
Black Panther was a cameo that was talking to the President of the United States.
I think I remember that briefly. Yeah.
Cloak and Dagger. That's who I was thinking of. So I don't think we saw Luke Cage or Jessica Jones, but Cloak and Dagger showed up, and they were the ones helping Daredevil when the power was out and chaos was going around for when Magneto had taken over. So yeah, they were the ones who were helping Daredevil on the streets of New York was Cloak and Dagger.
Okay, I know they had a show, but like I never really heard much about it, and like I don't know much about the characters, but
It's a really it's so I would say that it's a nice duo. It's really, really cool. They were injected with a power, I believe. So one of them is light. They can control like the light force, and the other one can control the dark force. So
okay.
they're kind of like twin superpowers, so that's why they're normally like a duo. So it's usually not like, oh, here's Cloak, oh, here's Dagger. It's like, oh, there's Cloak and Dagger, and it's like Cloak wears this big black cloak, and it's awesome, and Dagger wears like a white uniform usually.
Hmm.
Just kind of shows the duality of their powers. But yeah, it's really cool. I'd recommend checking them out. I think there's one where they team up with like Miles Morales Spider-Man, and it's pretty cool.
Oh, cool. Yeah, I don't know. I just feel like those characters.
Regular Spider-Man. I can't remember, but I think it's Miles Morales.
Okay. It'd be interesting to if they showed up in the MCU at some point just to I think they're characters that don't get much. So,
I think that that's probably what they were maybe aiming for when they made the show in 2018, but
mhm.
Marvel so obviously the shows were made by different people back then.
Yeah.
And Marvel did not really have control over it. Marvel wasn't, it was probably just in association, so they didn't really help with a lot. They were just kind of like, hey, yep, you can use this, oh, you can't use this, oh, you can do this. And but I think that finally, now that Marvel has so much control over their characters and they have a lot of their domains back, I definitely agree with you that I think they should show up in the future. Same with like finally seeing the Young Avengers team up, and we're finally
Yeah.
finally getting the Fantastic Four. Oh,
Yay.
I cannot wait. It's gonna be so good, Berkey. It's gonna be
Yeah. I'm
uh,
excited.
yeah,
I'm excited.
it's phenomenal. And we saw Doom, so there you go. We know that the Fantastic Four is in this universe too. So there's possibility that we can see even more Marvel cameos in the future X-Men, and which is good
Yeah.
because we have been starving for content where the X-Men are in it, but we can also see other Marvel heroes, or especially with the
Yes.
MCU.
Yes.
We have all these Marvel heroes, but no X-Men. Bull. Give
Yeah.
the X-Men. Like we need them, and I need to know where they've been this whole time. And it's so what now? Like what it looks like they're doing is like, oh, the X-Men have been in a different universe, and now we're gonna meet on Battle World, and all that is gonna be crazy. Number one, Battle World itself is awesome, and I swear, if we see the scene from the comics where Doctor Doom rips Thanos's like skull out of his body, still attached to his spine, I will freak out. It's like the coolest thing they've ever done in a comic, because like Doom's like a god, and he
Yeah.
looks Thanos and he goes, "Do you have the Infinity Gauntlet?" And he goes, "Well, no, but I'm still the most powerful." And before he can even finish the sentence, Doom like punches through Thanos and rips his spine out with his skeleton, like with his skull still attached. And he's like, "Yeah, I'm more powerful now." And it's awesome. It's like it's if you haven't, have you ever read Secret Wars?
No, I've not read it. I think I could probably go find it. Honestly, it's like reading the comics is like I've read a few, but
Newer. I think that was from the newer Secret Wars, but
okay.
it's very, yeah, because the art was like a little bit more modern. It's phenomenal. Highly recommend reading it. It's awesome. Read both of them really, but it's really, really cool. But yeah, it's getting back on point. Seeing Doom and all these cameos, it was nice and it's refreshing because we're fans of Marvel, not like, oh, I'm a fan of only the heroes, but like get those mutants out of here. Like, no, I want all. Like I want
Mhm.
all. So it was really nice as a Marvel fan being able to finally see, like obviously in the comics we can see it, but in an actual like live medium, being able to watch them interact together was really nice, really refreshing. And I
Yeah.
think I'm going as far to say that I think this show gave Marvel fans that breath of fresh air that they were looking for, where
Yeah.
you can have a show based around the X-Men and then other people will cameo in it. Almost like an
Yes.
90s where we're watching an X-Men show and all of a sudden Spider-Man shows up and you're like, yo, it's Spider-Man. And like it's nice and it's refreshing to be able to see your characters jump in and out of the movies like that. That's
Yeah.
why, when you watch a movie or a show and it's just an all-out cameo fest, but it doesn't mean anything. No, like we want a show where somebody jumps in and they stay the whole time to help. And that's it's refreshing to have this show do that, and I hope that we get to see more of it in the future. I hope we
Mhm.
get to see more of it in live action. But
Yeah.
seeing it in animation was good enough for me for now, but in the near future, I hope they're gonna pull a thing from DC where like these characters are gonna be able to jump back and forth live action and animated, and they're gonna be able to like be played by the same people, and I hope that they're able to do that soon, and or at least just have characters jump in and be able to help out.
Yeah, it's just like unfortunate that like that because of all the rights issues that the MCU couldn't start out with having the X-Men and Spider-Man integrated and like Fantastic Four and whatnot. Because if they had the ability to do that from the very beginning, I'm sure Kevin Feige would have absolutely done that, and we might have had more cohesion by this point in like phase 4 and 5. But like unfortunately they had to do.
Yeah, it sucks knowing that we still don't even have Spider-Man fully. Like we have to hope and pray that Sony keeps that good relationship going.
Yes, yeah,
If
yeah,
Sony you know what? I'm gonna make this public right here on the Tribe of Nerds. If Sony ever messes with my Spider-Man and
again.
gets him out of the again, because it almost happened. And
Yeah,
we were up in arms and people
yes,
were freaking out and they were like cussing out Sony and Marvel over this.
yes,
Swear to God, I will lead the revolution over Sony if they mess up that Spider-Man. Because you know what? We all care about him and we need him in that Marvel universe because he is a phenomenal character. If anyone is an anchor being to Marvel, it's Spider-Man.
yeah, yep,
So if they ever lose him, I will freak out. And I mean any Spider-Man. If they lose Peter Parker, I'll freak out. If they lose Miles, I'll freak out. If they,
hmm
I swear, if they lose Spider-Gwen, I'll freak out. The
yeah,
Cowboy Spider, T-Rex Spider, Spider-Cat, Spider-Pig, Spider-Man Noir, all of them, I'll freak out.
yeah, yep,
And on that note, Sony, get back to making Beyond the Spider-Verse. I
Ye-
need a movie, bro. Get that out. Get that here.
yeah. Unfortunately, I mean, I'll probably see Venom: Last Dance just because for Tom Hardy. Like, I'll go see it for Tom Hardy, because that he's by far the best part of the first two. That he's the only reason to go watch those. And then everything else, unfortunately, we're getting Craven the Hunter. That's probably gonna be bad, and I'm so glad I didn't sit through Madam Web because I knew from watching Morbius that it was going to probably be terrible. So like,
And I promise I'm not a hater, but I prefer when these characters that they want to have their own movies. I'm not gonna lie, I'm not a huge fan of the Venom franchise. I know that we went and saw the first one together in theater.
yes,
It was
yeah,
awesome. And like the fights were cool, and Tom Hardy is a good actor. I think his Eddie Brock is interesting. It's very different from most Eddie Brocks that we've seen in the past.
hmm
Um, but I think that some of these characters, they're trying to give them too much time to themselves. And like I know that the lethal protector is a thing. I understand. But if I'm the only person who thinks this on the face of the earth, I'll die on this hill. Okay? You can come to my house and fight me, nerds, and I'll die on this hill. Venom is best when he's a Spider-Man villain.
Oh yeah, I mean, I don't think you're alone in that. So
Yeah, when he's a Spider-Man villain fighting Spider-Man.
yeah,
Like Morbius, that's a little different. Like he fights Spider-Man, but he also does his own stuff sometimes. And like Morbius is kind of a little bit of a different character. But I love Morbius the most when he's fighting Spider-Man.
yeah,
I love Kraven the Hunter the most when he's fighting Spider-Man. Madam Web, they made a whole movie about Madam Web and it didn't have frickin' Spider-Man in
they
it.
just made horrible references that felt
How
cheap.
could this happen? That shouldn't be possible or plausible. And they tried it, and they're like, "How did this fail?" But Sony needs to realize that if you want these characters to shine, work with Marvel and get them in the MCU. They need Spider-Man to survive. Kraven the Hunter is not strong enough to survive without Spider-Man. Venom
Yeah.
is great, but Venom is better with Spider-Man.
Yeah. Yeah.
Get Spider-Man 2, a game with Spider-Man and Venom in it.
Yeah.
That video game had more hype than both of the Venom movies combined.
Oh, I agree with that.
And it's because they need Spider-Man. Spider-Man, they were made for Spider-Man, tailor-made.
Yeah.
And it's like I get where they're going because like the Joker got a movie. Do you want to know something crazy about the Joker movie? It had Bruce Wayne. So we know Batman's gonna be a thing. It had Bruce Wayne in it. But I swear to God, none of these Venom movies, not Madam Web, not like, well, Madam Web, they're going to argue that it did. Shut up. No, it didn't. Did not have Peter Parker. Didn't have Spider-Man. Joker movie didn't have Batman, but it had Bruce Wayne. So we know that Batman's going to be a thing. And now, like, we wait, pretty much. We wait for Batman to show up and beat the crap out of this mentally ill, pill-popping loner. That's what we're waiting for. This frickin' singing with Lady Gaga clown in the corner. We're waiting for him to get his mouth popped by a guy dressed as a bat with, like, trauma. And it's just, they don't get it. They need their hero to be a good villain. And they're like, oh, he can be an anti-hero. Anti-heroes aren't cool anymore. We got rid of those. They were 90s when everyone was depressed. Now we need hope in the world.
Well, and anti-heroes, just basing an entire subsection of your own universe on an anti-hero, like anti-heroes, it just doesn't work. So
somebody tried to I am a firm believer that Deadpool is not an anti-hero, he's a hero. And they're like, oh, well, sometimes he does bad things. I'm sorry, have we seen Avengers? They murder everyone.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of
murder every single movie we watch.
Yeah, there's
watch
casualties.
Hawkeye was literally murdering people in that show. You watch Echo murdering people. We saw Avengers, all freaking 4 of them. They murdered people.
Yeah.
They're a bunch of murderers. And it's like, and I'm not saying that to discredit. It's awesome. I love watching them murder. I'll pay a lot of money to watch them murder even more people in 2 years.
Yeah, there's
Deadpool is not an anti-hero. He's just a hero that does bad things for good reasons.
Yes.
And sometimes he does shitty things. Why? Because he's funny. That's why. That's the only... I'm a firm believer. I will stand on that principle. If Rob Liefeld disagrees with me, I will respectfully disagree with Rob Liefeld. And that sounds crazy because he literally made the character. But it's, I respect that you can do what you want with your character. I'm not going to yell at comic book studios or movie studios if they want to try something new. Prime example, the new Batman show. They tried some new things. Some of them worked, some of them didn't. I respect that they made creative decisions.
Yeah.
I'm already smarter than half of the people who worked at Fox Studios on their Marvel movies.
All right, I think let's close this out, but I mean, we have a couple things we can talk about before we end the podcast. So D23 is happening tonight, I think, or this weekend at least. We're gonna get some news probably by tonight. So I mean, Daredevil Born Again we're gonna get news on that, absolutely. And the shows. I mean, there's potential we might get news on like a Moon Knight season 2, which I wasn't a fan of exactly where that show ended up going because it was part of that mess of like the past few years with the MCU. But I loved Oscar Isaac in the role, and I loved at least the character of that show was the strongest part. So I hope we get news on that because I want to see Moon Knight back in the MCU. I actually do. And do better with him. And then, I mean, we'll see what else we get. I think it's just going to be on the Disney Plus shows to like this weekend because that's what D23 is for Disney Plus. So like, I'm sure we're going to get that more than anything on. I think we got the news we're going to get on the upcoming movies, and I think that's what Marvel's okay with, and that's what they should be focusing on. So, um, anything else for you from like about D23 coming up?
Not really. Just kind of, we're going to be waiting for more nerd stuff to come out, but also reviewing the nerd stuff that already has been coming out. So
Yeah.
here we go.
Yeah, so next week on that, we'll tease what we're gonna do next week because we're gonna get into a lot of our content. I would recommend people subscribe and like our content so like we can keep putting out more and like you can know when it's coming out. So next week, Gabe and Josh and I are gonna do that Batman Cape Crusader. So we're gonna just talk about that, the three of us. And I've started watching it. Like there's some really good things as you said, talking about it before. Interested to see where it goes. So I'll finish watching that and we'll talk about that next week. So excited for that. And then as far as our other teams that are going to be doing stuff, I believe I'll announce this as well. But if you're listening, you'll get a sneak peek at this first. I believe Kevin, Sarah, Cam, and I are going to be doing Transformers next. So, which I never got into them, but I'm very open to talking about the Transformers series. So I think we'll be starting with the Michael Bay, Shia LaBeouf Transformers. So should be interesting to get into that. And singing the Shia LaBeouf song, I'm sure.
For your life, it's Shia LaBeouf.
See what else. And then Matt and Michael and I are going to continue at international Survivor stuff. We're going to be talking about the next Australian Survivor season, which is Heroes versus Villains, and talking about King George, which for anybody that loves Survivor might be interested in it. Heroes versus Villains is a great season. King George is one of the best Survivor players to come out of Survivor post-pandemic. So definitely should go check him out if you're curious about who that guy is. Let's see. Other stuff. I'm trying to think what the other team is doing. JJ, Will, and I, we're gonna do some Pokemon stuff. I'm gonna be doing a Sporkle session again, trying to name all the Pokemon. So I don't know if I can do the later generations. I feel pretty confident on the earlier ones, but that's basically what's happening. So without any further ado, Josh, you have anything else before we close it out now?
You know what? I'm a huge Funko guy, so I'm gonna come at you with some new Funkos coming out. I have one in the cart right now. 85th anniversary of Batman is this year.
Nice.
So I'm celebrating that. If no one's ever seen on my screen behind me, I have two of like DC comics. I have some of Batman's most famous villains, and I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11 different versions of Batman behind me. Michael Keaton Batman is getting more Funko Pops, and one of is in his famous Batmobile.
Ooh.
And the other one is him with the wings open, gliding. And that one is probably my favorite. They have a Lady Deadpool coming out. I believe one of them is already out, but they have new ones coming out. They have a new Wolverine with Headpool. They have a new Deadpool with Dogpool. I think I might have gotten some of those switched up, or either way, they have more Funko Pops coming out. So many cool ones, so many Marvel, so many Batman, and it's nice. Look, our nerd culture is growing, and it's getting more popular, and more stuff's coming out. Joker 2 coming out in like a month or so. I think October. So
yeah. Yeah, we can talk about that. I mean, to be honest, I wasn't as big of a fan of the first Joker just because I mean, it was dark and shocking. I've seen the movie twice. We watched it together, I believe, the first time. And it was just like, what just happened? But like there's some good stuff to talk about. I mean, Joaquin Phoenix is fantastic in the role, but like it just wasn't I don't think it was my cup of tea. I will try watching the second one so we can talk about it. But
We're
I'm
gonna see a whole DC musical, so we can
yeah,
talk about it on the podcast.
yeah. And I mean, I'm sure there's gonna be some shocking dark moments in the second Joker as well, just like with the first one. So but yeah, so excited for that. Thanks for bringing that up. And anything else?
I think that should be it, as long as everyone remembers that Magneto was right.
Yes. All right. We will see you for our next podcast on the Tribe of Nerds.